Cajun music, which is unique to this area of South Louisiana. It's connected to the wetlands and the coast. It's a type of culture that today's musicians are trying to preserve. Like the culture of the people that were known as the Acadians, it became the Cajuns. And the land where they settled, that land is fading away. We're losing the land, but that doesn't mean that we have to lose the culture. And so musicians, as well as academics, the people of the bayou are trying to preserve that. Although we might lose some of the wetlands, we don't want to lose that culture. I live in this area, I work in this area. The beauty of this estuary enriches my life. But even though it's beautiful, there's some impairments. And once you know what to look for, you can see that it's changing. It's not healthy in all the places that it should be. And so even though I can't fix it, I'd like to be part of the solution. Me and several of my colleagues have made the decision to do what we can to be part of the restoration of this estuary. For starters, I teach my classes the connection between their own physiology and the physiology of this ecosystem, and the relevance and the uniqueness of this estuary. I'm also working with a group of musicians who are trying to preserve music as an integral part of the estuary and the culture of the estuary. I've joined neighbors and colleagues in the work that's being done by the Barataria-Terrebonne National Estuary Program. We call it BITNEP. It's got a management conference. The management conference has people from all over the estuary. We call them stakeholders. They're the people that work and that want to be able to help to make decisions about policies in the estuary. Each conference member represents a different part of the community, a different section of the community that uses the estuary. They help us make decisions, but they also go back to their own sector and they communicate with their own folks about the ways that we need to change to preserve this estuary. The mission of the Barataria-Terrebonne National Estuary Program is to protect and restore the 4.2 million acre region between the Mississippi and the Atchafalaya rivers. The estuary stretches from the area around False River and New Roads all the way down to the mouth of the Mississippi and the mouth of the Atchafalaya rivers to the Gulf of Mexico. The estuary from one end to the other is important habitat for fish, crabs, shrimp, crawfish, mammals, and birds, and of course the people who live there. Like Albertine Kimball, she's a former member of the Management Conference and former Coastal Program Manager for Plaquemine Parish. She lives where the estuary meets the Gulf of Mexico, so she understands what it means to adapt to a sinking coast and rising water levels.
I'm living outside the levee protection. So to live here, the parish has rules that you have to be a certain footage. They told me last time it was 8, but I went 14, and I got it twice on the same day, 7 years apart. Flooding, Katrina, August 29th, and Isaac, August 29th. So now I think I'm gonna beat it because the levee's only 17 and I'm 22. I hope I got it this time. I went a little bit higher than you needed to go, but look where I am. Mother Nature rules this. I have nothing to do with it. I'm just living in its land. It's important to be here because if I'm not here and nobody cares, we're not gonna have anything. And you need to keep fighting for this coast because this is such a unique place to live. This Plaquemine Parish is the most unique place to live in the whole United States, I think, because it has 3 basins in it. They have the Barataria Basin, we're in the Britton Sound Basin, and the Mississippi River Basin. I don't think there's any other parish that has 3 basins in it. So we are blessed by that, plus the river. And I like the river because it's my front yard and the marsh is my backyard. I never had to cut the grass. I had wild fern growing all over. It was beautiful. But now I had to adapt to a change if I wanted to live here. I needed to, figure out what my plan was going to be and how I was going to adapt. So when we have a high tide, I tie my pirogues up to the step. That bugs are part of the environment. It's all right. Oh, it's important to the rest of the nation because we provide so much oil and gas to the nation, commerce on the river to the nation, seafood to the nation. Those three things alone, it's so unique. The whole state, actually. We got to keep on pushing or we won't be here.
Going around the table, we see a couple of friends who are working to save their communities.
I think growing up in South Louisiana, we have a huge tie to our families. I know when we were growing up, every summer we'd go on a camping trip on Fouchon Beach right before school started. And it was amazing every year that you'd see going over the Leeville Bridge, more and more water, less and less land.
I think that's what's driven our passion. I mean, he spent summers on Fouchon Beach. I spent summers in the bays of Terrebonne fishing with my dad and my granddad. And you go there now as a 30-something, and the spots that you had marked on a map or on a GPS as kind of an island you can tie up on are no longer there. It's a fishing hole now.
I think you just kind of plant your roots and you adapt to the changes and the environmental conditions that you have to face wherever you live.
What we've witnessed is that we can rebuild the coast. Does it take a lot of money? Does it take a lot of different strategies? Sure it does. Whether we looked at the Barataria or Terrebonne National Estuaries, we know that if we take sediment from one place, we can build land in another, and it doesn't necessarily have to harm the spot you took that sediment from. Over the years, we found some better ways to adapt some of these projects.
With Archie and I working, he in Lafourche and I in Terrebonne at the same time, it was easy to see where there's no physical boundary between the two parishes or between hydrologic basins. So to have that cooperation from the state level also in conjunction with the local folks, it's been really nice and productive over the last couple decades, seeing that we're all fighting the same fight, and when we come together and we pool our resources, it's much more effective, and we can really save this place.
I don't know that we're going to go far away in some of those lower lying areas that are outside of a contiguous levee system. Those people may be relocated, but to say that you're gonna have a mass exodus out of this place, I don't think that the hearts of the people here would let them leave the bayou. I think that the people who grew up here and live here are going to stay here because we love the place we live and we're going to fight for it.
My ancestry tells me that 7 out of my 8 great-great-grandparents came from Cheniere Caminada. I think preserving this culture and this history and the people and their communities that they work so hard to build as long as we can and as strong as we can is crucially important.
Also, with the management conference are representatives from the state of Louisiana, the United States Army Corps of Engineers, and oil and gas, all working with BitNep to tackle the challenge of coastal land loss.
None of us have been alive long enough to understand if this is a permanent change or a cyclical change. Either way, we have to adapt to it, right? If the ice caps are melting, we have some technology to help protect low-lying communities. Let's build levees or let's build seawalls. There's a seawall right outside the door and there's levees all around us. So if sea level rises like they're predicting with no polar ice caps, we're gonna have 6 more feet of water right here. This community might become inundated, but once again, we have the ability to help protect it as much as we can, so I think we should do it.
We're sinking, sea levels are rising, our land is eroding, and it's affecting our economy, our culture, everything that relies on that landscape. And so, we really kind of started to recognize this probably in the mid-70s or so. And so for the last 30 or 40 years, there have been efforts in place to try to help restore our coast, and recognizing that the problem is such a big issue. That's really why you see a lot of innovation, and I think you see Louisiana leading the way in dealing with some of these issues.
Our property is located near a very large white sand pit in the bottom of the Mississippi River. So access to good-looking dredge materials are right there. And it's simply a matter of finding the funding to use a proven method of replenishing the marsh. It was amazing to me because that work was going on when I first started coming down here for the company, and to see that pumped in white sand was covered with plant material within a month. It's just remarkable, and it's very encouraging when you see a project that can demonstrate that kind of relief and over a fairly short period of time.
Adaptation is nothing new for Louisiana first. Louisiana's coast is extremely dynamic. It's been changing for thousands of years. You know, our land erodes, land builds, so we are very good at adapting to environmental conditions in Louisiana. We in Louisiana have a master plan for a sustainable coast. It's a way to make those tough decisions about what are the best investments we think for our coast and for the people of our coast, of course. And then secondly, it's a list of priorities for the state to work on, and hopefully for other partners to work on as well. It includes things like ridge restoration projects, marsh restoration projects. There are some structural projects like levees and flood walls and those kind of things in the master plan. And then there's some what we call non-structural projects, which are sort of less traditional ways of helping to reduce risk to our citizens, elevating homes, flood-proofing businesses.
I think we are adapting, and we're on our way to a pace where we can actually get some things done. This is a combination of a whole bunch of different efforts that are allowing us to do coastal protection and restoration type projects. Our district, North Lafourche Levee District, South Lafourche Levee District, and Terrebonne Levee District are the only 3 levee districts in the state where people have voted sales taxes upon themselves for construction of flood protection, so levees and drainage type things. That's a strong indication of folks recognizing that they do have to spend some money proactively to get there. The idea that we can always choose to do the best thing for the region is one of the things that really makes a difference for me.
Similar hypoxic zones can happen downstream.
We're building a skill set and a knowledge base that can be used to help other places and become an exportable skill set, which is not only good for Louisiana, but it's good for other places dealing with these issues as well.
As the Science Standards Work Group members and committee convened together to develop the new Louisiana Student Standards for Science, they thought deeply about some of the land loss and coastal issues that we experience as a state. At the beginning of a unit of study or a lesson, a teacher may introduce a phenomenon. For example, why is marsh restoration in Plaquemines Parish important? As students engage in learning with the new Louisiana Student Standards for Science, they walk away with an urgency to really consider on a day-to-day basis how their actions are impacting the world in which they live. Students are really passionate about science education, and students are even more passionate about coming up with solutions to a lot of the coastal issues that we are experiencing.
The Wetlands Discovery Center does a really good job of putting programs together to educate students on coastal land loss.
You guys catching anything?
One of the programs of the Wetlands Discovery Center is our Coastal Classroom series. What we do is we take the Louisiana Science Standard, and then we adapt that standard to focus on wetlands-based education. For example, if the students have to learn about soils, they'll learn about standard soils, but for the regular curriculum. But what we do is we make it about alluvial soil. We make sure that there's a wetlands focus to it so that the kids are actually learning about the soil they live on rather than the soil outside of Louisiana. Good job.
A good example of cooperation is the Spanish Pass project, putting dredged sediment to good use for ridge restoration.
This project you see here is called the Spanish Pass Ridge Project. All of this material that you see here came from the disposal area that the Corps of Engineers has been using when they dredge the head of passes area.
It took about 6 months or so of actual pumping the material and moving it by barge and then unloading it. I was contacted by Susan Bergeron looking for a project that BitNet might be able to assist with, and they were actually looking at some place to vegetate. They are working with their partners, Shell Oil, as a funding agent And they're actually going to go out and plant trees and other vegetation on that ridge to give it a head start and to see if we can't speed up Mother Nature and get the right vegetation growing down there.
This right here is the first mile of an 8-mile project, which the Corps plans on doing in the next couple of years. I think we're looking 4, 5, 6 years out, that hopefully we'll have all 8 miles of this area done.
One ridge by itself doesn't do a lot, but if we could do more of these ridges, every one of those actually helps in a storm surge and water being pushed in. So not only are they acting as a unique area for ecosystems and migratory birds and habitat, but also it's actually helping protect us here on the coast.
We're investing in coastal restoration because it's the right thing to do. Shell's operated successfully in the state of Louisiana for over 100 years. All of our lines of business are represented here. We have 4,200 staff across the entire state. One of the things I'm most proud of is the amount of staff we have that are out in the world getting their hands dirty, doing really material projects like planting wetlands and working in marshes and cleaning up debris from the shoreline. Projects that are making a real material impact on the state coastal master plan, which identifies all the priorities for the state.
So we recognize it's a challenge and it's a problem for coastal Louisiana, but also the nation. And so we want to be a part of finding the solutions to that. We all recognize it now. We need to move forward with finding what are the right actions to take, that we can work together to create the sustainable coast that we all need. And so I think we have the potential here in Louisiana to be the front runners, to find the right opportunities and to be able to find the right solutions. That'll be great for Louisiana, great for the nation, but also something that's exportable, something that we can continue to do in other parts of the world, because this is a significant challenge for the world.
This is not just a Louisiana problem, it's indeed a national problem.
I fell in love with Port Fourchon over 10 years ago when I was actually the public involvement coordinator for BITNEP, for the Barataria Terrebonne National Estuary Program. At that point in time, that was 2005, 6, 7, and the port was just undertaking the beginning of the expansion. What was going on then was, the port was having to construct wetlands to mitigate for its footprint, but also was going above and beyond that requirement and partnered with BITNEP to craft this maritime forest ridge. And so that maritime forest ridge is a 120-acre plus complex now that it's settled down to its final height. So the ridge protected the port's infrastructure from Katrina's storm surge. The marsh thatch that was Katrina debris from all the marsh that got chewed up and got stuck on the north side of the ridge, we actually stacked it on top and used it basically as a mulch. And so it really did help to kind of jumpstart what was going on. And so again, that's that adaptation to the environment and to those challenges. From the time that I left in 2007 to the next time that I had the opportunity to come out to the ridge was 8 years had passed. And in those 8 years, not only had the vegetation on the ridge started to take off and flourish, but the port had built an additional 400 acres of marsh in front of the ridge. You had to walk nearly a mile from the boat to the ridge. And now, from 8 years before, when nothing was growing and we were killing ourselves and trying so hard to get things to be successful, to this point in time, when you can hear these birds, you can see trees that are 15, 20 feet tall, the vegetation is so thick you can barely walk through it, was probably the most professionally gratifying moment of my entire career. If I was a girlier girl, I would have cried like a baby, because it was such an amazing experience and such a great accomplishment. We are probably the best example of the value proposition for the nation of restoring coastal Louisiana in a meaningful way. 20% of the nation's oil and gas passes right here through Port Fourchon. We are currently servicing 100% of the exploration and production in the U.S. Gulf of Mexico. Louisiana is critical to the nation. 50% of the nation's refining capacity is connected to the Loop pipeline, which also passes right here through the port and specifically through the wetlands between the Gulf and Galliano. And so everything that we can do lowers the risk to the nation of something that's going to disrupt our economy, our culture, and our way of life. BITNEP has absolutely fostered some of the most important conversations around the science. Things like the Maritime Forest Ridge are science in action. They are applied science in a way that nobody else was doing. And it wasn't a think tank, it wasn't a science project, it was a real public-private partnership. We enlisted, Shell was a contributing sponsor to the Ridge in a cash way. They've been here in an in-kind way and a big deal. They've brought hundreds of volunteers over the years, all throughout this marsh complex. And so BitNet has fostered some of the best relationships to get the job done. So the thing that's always set the estuary program apart is that it has brought everybody together. And so when there wasn't money, the estuary program was this place to build these relationships between all of these industries and partners and unique interests together towards this one goal of preserving, protecting, and restoring the Barataria-Terrebonne estuaries. No one else has that unique blend, and no one else is serving that function at the level that BitNet is serving that function.
Like the musicians dedicated to preserving a unique cultural art form, the Barataria-Terrebonne National Estuary Program, with its management conference partners and its outreach to the community at large, is dedicated to discovering, implementing, and sharing the science that can lead to sustainable living in a dynamic yet fragile, threatened environment.